This is Justin.
And this is Haley, and you're listening to The Price of Avocado Toast.
We're a married millennial couple wanting to normalize conversations about money. We want to hear about your highs and your lows,
The do's and the don'ts on your path towards financial freedom.
All right, everybody, we have David joining us today. This is probably the interview I've been most excited about, and I'm sorry for any of our former guests that are listening, but David was the former host of my favorite podcast, The Budget Teacher, and this is an interview I've been waiting for a long, long time. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This is great. I've been a fan of your guys' for a long time. Actually, before you even started the podcast, I know I came across your page on Instagram, and I'm really excited about being able to talk with you guys.
I'm just really excited that you're here, and when I re-listen to this episode, it's going to be crazy for my head to think like, oh, there's David from the Budget Teacher podcast and us all at the same time talking, because I just hear you in your podcast in my ears. Anyway, it's weird once you like really talk to someone after listening to their voice for a long time.
Yeah, you're not a real person. You were just a voice for a while, but now we get to see your face, so you're real.
Yeah, very real. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here. Can you just like start off and tell us a little bit about who you are? We know who you are. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are?
Sure. So I guess it all starts with my wife and I. We were a two-teacher family, and right before we got married, we were struggling kind of with our finances and trying to figure out how are we going to make this work. You know, we were never ones that were like massively in debt, but we didn't have a plan at all, and we didn't have a lot left over at the end of the month. And so we started looking for ways that we could maximize, our money and start to try to figure out how we could move forward with everything. And so the day that we got back from our honeymoon, we started a family budget, which is possibly the worst timing of all time because, a lot is changing with marriage and all that stuff. And then we tack on a budget to it. It was just really challenging. But by doing that, our entire life forward changed. And that was 4 years ago. And about a year ago now, I left the teaching profession and became a financial advisor to help other teachers. And so I focus on helping teachers as well as millennial couples that are trying to figure out what they want to do with their money and kind of working forward like that.
Awesome. I know that we had originally connected, like you said, you were one of like our first Instagram followers before we even dropped an episode, and you had like started talking with Haley, and it was kind of like, oh, you guys are teachers. Me and my wife are teachers. Oh, Haley, you're a swim coach. I used to coach swim. Like there was a lot of like very common things that really made the connection kind of spark pretty quick. And then you started your pod, and it was honestly like my go-to listen. And it as unfortunate as it was with the COVID shutdown, I really looked forward to getting outside on some walks and like just listening to your podcast. It was like my Thursday morning thing I had to do. It was like, I've got to listen to the pod. So Haley would be teaching, and I would end my Zoom session with my kiddos, and Calliope and I would like go on a walk, and I would just listen to you and Ian on The Budget Teacher. And it was honestly like my favorite thing. And there was one episode you guys did that was like, ask us some questions, and you put my question on there. It's like minute 17 or something, and I was like fanboying over it. Like, like you guys are just like some untouchable podcast, and I'm like, wait a minute, I've talked to this guy on Instagram before, but it was just so cool. And so, I loved the podcast, and I'm glad that we've gotten to connect with you, and particularly because we're both teachers, and that's kind of where you were leaning with The Budget Teacher. But if you don't mind me asking, like, what kind of caused you to step away from teaching? There's obviously a lot of reasons that people leave teaching. If you're comfortable sharing, what did it in for you?
So I would say that the number one thing is that I just stopped enjoying it. And I think any teacher knows that there's a ton of challenges that come along with the profession. And if it was just about teaching, it may have been different, but there's so many other things that are involved in the education world. And I had told myself a long time ago, there was a time where money was the dictator of what I could and could not do. And so it's like, well, we need the job because we need the money. And so when we started our budget and when, everything started kind of changing as far as we made the plan for our money instead of our trying to do things retroactively and trying to go back and look at what had happened already. When we were proactive with it, we could start figuring out what did we want to do rather than what do we have to do. And so I was like, I love talking about money and I love helping other teachers. This would be something that would be so great for me to be able to do that in some way, shape, or form. And so it really just happened kind of one step at a time, but it was all because of that initial budget. And I think you guys are probably going to have a story kind of like that as you go along. I know you're already living it actually, but so it's kind of similar stories there too.
When you told your story about how you decided to take a year off of teaching to try financial coaching and see how well that worked for you, you guys were living off of your wife's sole teaching income. That was a huge inspiration for me because I was thinking, you can plan backwards, like you just said. What do I want? Well, for me, I really enjoyed working from home. I really enjoyed being home with my kids. I didn't necessarily want to be like a stay-at-home mom, but I wanted to figure out something that worked to allow me to do it all. I like teaching. So I created this idea, financial coaching, to be able to do it from home, and then we kind of worked backwards. And so having your story, looking at that, was an inspiration for me to even get the idea going in the beginning. So thanks for sharing your story because it clearly impacted me.
That's awesome. I love to hear that.
And now you were a math teacher, and I'm not going to beat around the bush and say that, math is everybody's favorite subject. Obviously, I'm an elementary school teacher, so is Haley. We very often hear that kids have kind of like a deficit mindset as far as math. So I don't want to say, that all math teachers just have like a terrible time or that you had a terrible time teaching, but I could see why math teachers might have a more difficult time long term because they encounter students sometimes at the high school level have really strong deficit mindsets. However, sorry, continue. Yeah, go ahead.
So to talk about that, I actually taught lower level algebra 2. And so this was the kids. So basically we took algebra 2 and we split it into two separate semesters. And these were the kids that had traditionally really struggled with math. And, as bad as it might be to say, the system had just kind of pushed them through until they got to my class. And so a lot of them really hated math. They thought they were really bad at math. And so one of my things that I always worked at the beginning of the semester, we did really basic, very easy math because what I wanted to do was build confidence because it didn't really matter about the math unless they felt like they could do it, right? And so I look at that a lot, like my math classes, just like a lot of people deal with their finances, where you have to give them some confidence first, because so many people have ingrained this idea in their minds that they can't be good with money, or that because my parents weren't good with money, I'm not good with money either. And I don't know how many times I heard in the classroom somebody say, well, my mom and dad aren't good with math, so I'm not going to be good with math either. And it's like, well, that's a limiting mindset right there. And but it's funny because as teachers, we always, I don't know how many teachers I've heard say like, oh, you have to get past that mindset and open up your possibilities and have the growth mindset and all this stuff. But then we also do that ourselves and limit ourselves and box ourselves in on things like money. And I know I'm guilty of it in some different aspects also. Money just happens to be one thing that I feel more confident about than others. And it's because I've read and learned and listened to podcasts and just tried to do everything I can to better myself in understanding, because I love to learn about money. But I always use the example, I absolutely hate working on my car. I will not do it. I would rather I would rather pay top dollar or whatever, any money to have somebody else do it, because I have this very fixed mindset about working on a car. And so it's interesting to me to see the similarities between teaching and working with people and their finances.
With your background, which I'm kind of jumping ahead to already knowing your story, you had a degree in finance, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So I actually graduated from a college with finance degree in 2008, and then went back to school to get my teaching certificate. I graduated there in 2012.
Okay, and so you taught for like roughly 7 or 8 years?
8. Yep.
Okay, so 8 years. At what point towards the end did you think, hey, I'm starting to lean back towards the kind of the finance world? Was it when you and your wife started to kind of make some changes with the family budget and stuff, or was there a time where you're like, oh, actually, beyond just math, finances are starting to click for me again?
Yeah, I think it was really just seeing our success and wanting everyone else to experience that. Because I wanted to shout it off the rooftop, like, hey guys, it's so simple. All you have to do is just be on a budget and make some small sacrifices and
Yep.
look at the giant amount of success you can have even in 1 year, even in 2 years. We've only been on a budget for 4 years. Like in the grand scheme of things, that's nothing, right? And
Mhm.
and the fact is that now we're living still more or less on my wife's salary as I continue to work and try to build up some income. But all of that is because we made some sacrifices. We kind of whittled things down as to what we could live with and couldn't live without. And then I wanted other people to experience that because it was so empowering.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I just read something on Instagram this morning, and it was kind of talking about that same concept. And I realized a lot of people in the personal finance space on Instagram or whatnot, they want others to have that same success
Yeah.
because it's traditionally not taking anything from their pocket. Your success with your personal budget and your finances doesn't dictate my family's success. We can all be successful through this sharing of information. And I've noticed that in the personal finance space, that's one of the only places, at least that I've noticed, you can really do that. There's a lot of other places that can get very like adversarial
Yeah.
with some of the I don't want to say creators, but whatever. So it's really interesting that you mentioned that you just wanted to shout from the rooftop like, "Hey, like I want to see everybody have this success because it feels good for us."
You're right. There's so much support in the financial community or on Instagram in the debt-free community. Everyone is rooting for you to succeed. They're not sitting there following you, cheering you on, hoping that you fail.
Yeah.
They really genuinely want to see you succeed, and that's the coolest part about being a part of that community for sure.
Yeah. And I also think that, going back to just the teacher specific, um, you know, there's so many times that we don't get paid what we're worth, right? At all.
Right.
But what we can do is maximize what we get paid. And so I wish we could get paid more, obviously, like, hey, if you're listening to this, go ahead and raise everybody's salaries, please, right? But because we have no control over that, what we do have control is where we spend, how much we spend, and what we spend on. And so, I've heard Kevin O'Leary. Do you guys ever watch Shark Tank?
Oh yeah.
And he says you vote with every dollar you spend. And so it's like, what are you voting for? What are you putting your money towards? That is it something that you value? Is it something that you don't enjoy at all? Like, but you're just kind of doing it. And so it's an interesting thing to see where people spend their money. I'm sure Haley gets to experience that now.
Yes, definitely. So I'm going to go back to financial coaching for a second with this next question because I'm getting questions on Instagram a lot about financial coaching versus financial advisor versus financial planner. And because you have been a financial coach and you're now a financial advisor, how would you define the difference between the two?
So I think that both of them provide a lot of education, but it's at different points where people need it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I would say that the biggest thing a financial coach can do is help you with your mindset around money. Because with a financial advisor, and so whenever I was financial coaching, what I did was I called, I think it was 250 different financial advisors to talk to them about like what their pain points were, what they needed, and stuff like that. And so what they would tell me, what I heard more times than not, was that when people came in that were in debt, they that they weren't ready to invest just yet, they would say, okay, we need you to go ahead and get your budget in line and then come back and talk to us in 6 months. And it's like, well, okay, that sounds great in theory, but if they don't have the knowledge or the skills to put that into place, where are these people going to go for support during that time? And I said, how about this? What if they came to a financial coach? We worked together for those 6 months, and then they came back to you with knowing what their cash flow was, knowing what they were spending each month on as far as expenses. Um, some people knowing what their income is. And so having those things in place before you work with a financial advisor could be huge. Now, that's not to say that people are working with financial advisors that have all that figured out.
Right.
But as an advisor, most of the time, um, my focus is probably more on the future than what it is right now. And I think that a financial coach helps more with what's going on right now and less about the future, although it will drastically impact that.
That
That,
was beautiful.
that's a really good way to sum that up.
Yeah.
Especially that last point that like a financial advisor is significantly more focused on like the future, whereas a financial coach is trying to get you to clean up the present habits
Right.
and stuff.
Yeah, I've been telling people usually you need to see a financial coach before you're even ready to see a financial advisor or a financial planner. Like that's if you're just drowning in debt, it's a different situation. If you have no idea how to budget, you're drowning in debt, you are living paycheck to paycheck, you probably don't have a bunch of money to be investing. Now that's a generic statement because everyone's finances are going to be different. And I'm not saying now that we've backed away from Mr. Dave Ramsey, I'm not saying that you don't need to invest at all if you're in that situation. But it's definitely you have to do one thing before you do the next for sure.
Yeah.
David, if I could just ask you then, how do you see a crossover or where do you see a crossover now in your current role? Kind of combining your background in finance, obviously as a financial advisor, but also your background as a teacher. Do you find there's crossover in your role now?
Oh yeah. I think that to be a good financial advisor or a financial coach, that you need to be a good teacher as well. Because first of all, I don't know. Well, I guess I do know a couple teachers. Most teachers that I know, let's say this one, have to have extreme patience, right? And I think that that's you know, in anything that you're dealing with, having the ability to well, probably be able to talk to people, but then also empathize with them, and then have patience towards whatever it is that you're working towards. Teachers have all of those things. They can explain things at a granular level that maybe they couldn't do at a, that other people can't do quite as well. So I think that having a background in teaching and having experience in teaching as well helps out a ton, because whenever you're working with people, all that you're doing is teaching them. It's just a different topic. I'm not teaching math so much anymore. It's still math related, I guess, but personal finance, financial topics, different things like that.
I think back to our time with listening to Dave Ramsey, and this was one thing that I did appreciate about Dave Ramsey, and I can't believe I'm saying that, but he always did say if you're going to work with somebody, you want them to be able to teach you. You
Yeah.
don't want to just kind of blindly do something that you don't understand. And so I could see how that's massively important. If you have the skills of a teacher who can explain things or maybe understand how somebody might learn something and adapt how you explain those things to them, it could be wildly more successful, or at least a better relationship because they're able to understand it and feel confident in it, which is just good teaching, right? It's just feeling confident in the content knowledge, no matter what it is, whether it's actually in the classroom or in doing something else. So I want to kind of stay in this realm of teaching here. You are a certified student loan professional. Professional. Am I saying that correctly?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously you've done some work in understanding the student loan realm and the student loan world and things going on right now. What are your thoughts? Because we have some kind of ideas about what's going on. What are your thoughts about the student loan crisis? What are your thoughts on all of it right now?
So I guess in general, if we're just generalizing, the big thing would be that there is a crisis, number one. And number two, I would think that it's more about how much people are paying for school than it is about anything else. And
Yeah.
so, no matter what kind of band-aid gets thrown on whatever we're doing, we need to look at the source of the problem. And that's where I think that we need to start with. And I don't think that we're going to do that right now. So whatever, I don't know anything that's going to happen as far as forgiveness or different programs or anything going forward. But I do know that there is a problem that needs to be addressed, and I don't think that it's actually being addressed.
I think that's a hard thing for a lot of people to come to grips with. Many of us want student loans to be forgiven or for some type of program to be set up where they're forgiven. However, we still have this like chaotic system that's going to continue to cause this.
Yeah, they could forgive everyone's student loans. Sure, they could do that. But then if they don't fix the problem, all of the rest of the kids that are in high school and middle school, when they get to college, they're going to be in the same situation. And so it is a band aid, like you said, if that happens. I mean, no one really knows. But I'm going to take it from here and talk about student loans a little bit with teachers because I know we have a lot of teachers that listen. Do you have teachers that listen?
For sure.
From Twitter, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I know we have a lot of teachers that listen. Okay, so Dave Ramsey, again, he seems to just be the topic. Dave Ramsey says over and over and over that the public service loan forgiveness for teachers is just a total scam. I mean, it's not just for teachers. So, what are your thoughts on that whole entire program? Because we listened to Dave Ramsey for 2 years telling us that it was a program that just fails and never works. And so we basically thought that that was not an option. So, what are your thoughts on that?
And so I'll give you a little bit of history on the public service loan forgiveness program. So this program started in 2007 for anybody who works in public service to follow a very, very strict criteria of rules. And it basically came down to they had to be in a certain income repayment strategy. So it had to be income driven repayments. They had to be in a public service job. They had to meet certain financial needs. And then finally, make 120 qualifying payments. So basically, more or less, if you're working for it straight through, you're paying for 10 years. So the first group of people that could come through as public service loan forgiveness candidates happened in 2017, 10 years after the program got started. The problem is that everybody applied for public service loan forgiveness, whether they were meeting the criteria that was mentioned before or not. And so at one point, there was like a 1% success rate of the program. And so the talking heads said, oh, this is a program that doesn't work at all. We need to trash it, all this stuff. Well, the program does work. People are having hundreds of thousands of dollars, thousands of dollars, kind of depends on how much loans you have, but public service people are having loans forgiven. They are forgiven the full loan, the interest, and it's completely tax-free after 10 years of service. But like I said, it's very strict on the rules that you have to follow. And so as 2018, 2019, 2020 has come, more people have found, hey, I need to be in this program doing these things, and kind of they have this, it's called recertifying your income. And so each year you can recertify and see how many of your credits count towards public service loan forgiveness. So each year now, more and more people that are applying are getting it because there's education behind it. So the big problem, I think, was that they had this program that most people didn't really know the rules for. And there was not any major attempt, I feel like, to have the rules be given out to people, but then they were slapping them on the wrist at the end saying, nope, you don't qualify. And so then a lot of people think that it doesn't work at all. It does work. It's there for teachers and for other people that work in public service. And it's a great program. You just have to follow the rules.
Thank you for giving that background because I had not considered that that was 4 years ago. So only for the last 4 years have people been able to even cash it in and be like, okay, I'm done. So yeah, if you didn't do it right, it's only been 4 years. So it's really not much data for sure.
I think people also just think, oh yeah, well I work in public service, so I'm just gonna apply. Oh, I didn't get it, and so you have this huge sample of people that have applied and only a small bit that have gotten it accepted, and it's obviously going to spike the numbers like you said. But if they didn't know what the program was, then you can't even really include them because they didn't,
right.
They weren't on the right payment schedules or they weren't able to certify. Like it just kind of spikes the rates and makes it look like a bad program when really there was just maybe a lack of education around it all.
That's a good point.
Yeah, 100%. There's also so many things that you can do with the public service loan forgiveness, and I don't want to go into all of them today, but what I would suggest is, and not just for me, but there's tons of certified student loan professionals out there. Reach out to one and see if they can help you with your particular situation, because it can get very complex. It's the idea in general is fairly simple, but there's so many nuances to the program that you can kind of manipulate it into your favor. And so working with somebody who really knows the ins and outs is going to be beneficial for a lot of people, I think. And to know if it's even something that you should try for, because depending on how much you have in student loans and your family size and your income and all the different things that you have going on, it might not be the program for you. And so knowing that ahead of time I think is a big advantage, because you don't want to go 10 years and then be like, oh, I could do this thing, and then it not be the right program for you to go into.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, because someone, if they have like $10,000 worth of loans, could probably pay that off in 10 years. But someone who has a whole bunch of, I don't know, 6 figures of student loan debt, that's a whole different story.
Yeah. It's very much case by case.
Yeah. Personal finance is personal. Hey.
Personal finance is personal. All right, we're going to move on to your personal finance if you're comfortable sharing. So, David, you've obviously mentioned that you guys got on the family budget, coming back from the honeymoon. You're 4 years in now. Do you find that there's anywhere in your budget that you still kind of personally struggle with, or maybe the family struggles with overall? Because I know that we still mess things up constantly, and we're almost 2 years into our budgeting journey.
I think that the budgeting journey, as you mentioned, ebbs and flows, right? And you cannot have a hard budget that doesn't have some wiggle room and some give to it. And I think that's where a lot of people that I've dealt with and worked with in the past have struggled, is that that as soon as somebody starts the debt-free journey, I've seen so many people that are like, okay, I'm going to take my going out to eat budget down to $20 a month. And it's like, well, that's just not going to work, right?
Yeah, that's not realistic long term.
Exactly. And it's kind of, to me, it's like crash dieting. And you don't want to, do anything that's too extreme all at once. Now, like I said, we have been budgeting for 4 years. And we have it to a point now where we have looked at every single line item in our budget and said, okay, is there a way to get the same quality for what we want for cheaper? And sometimes the answer is yes. And sometimes the answer is no. And sometimes the answer was, yes, let's try it. And then we found out how bad it was and switched. So for example, on that one, we cut our cell phone service down to one of those like third tier down cell phone companies, right? And we couldn't use our phones at all. We just had no service. We couldn't use any data. And we were paying $25 a month per person. And it's like, hey, we're getting our cell phones for $50 a month. This is great. Except that we can't text each other. We can't talk. Yeah, my wife and I, we can't do anything. So it's like, well, now I've just got this brick in my pocket that that I'm paying $50 a month for. So we actually went back to a mainstream carrier, and we're now paying $100 a month for that, which is still, it's not great. It's not, I don't know where people are on that one, but it's something that we felt like we needed, because now we can actually use our phones, out in public in a congested area and be able to text one another if we need to. So I guess the question you asked was, is there anything we struggle with? And at this point, no. But early in, we struggled with everything. It's such a hard process. And especially, we had no background in budgeting. We had never done it before. So 4 years ago, this month, as a matter of fact, August 1st of 2017 was when we started the budget. And that month, so it's back to school, right? And so my wife always, every single year, would buy herself a brand new back to school outfit. So we had set up where we were each going to have a certain amount of money each month. I believe it was $200 a month that we could do whatever we wanted with. And so she went out and bought her back to school outfit. And that took a large chunk of her money. And she was not thrilled about that. And I don't know how, if you guys have ever had we won't even call it a fight, but just a tough, what's a word for like a little less than a fight in a marriage?
A tiffy.
Tiffy, there we go. That's what I was looking for. If you guys have ever had a tiffy, but we had a big tiffy, and it was like, and I understood it from her side, because she had just taken my last name. She kind of felt like she was losing some of her own like identity. And then it's like, now we're on this budget and we're both trying to figure out how that's going to work. And she was mad at me. And so it was 100% my fault, because I had this great idea of budgeting, but I didn't exactly include her in all the conversations. Now, on the other side of that, I tried to, but she didn't really have a whole lot of interest also. And so it was just like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I just kind of ran with it. And so anyways, we had the $200 that first month for each of us. And I cut out 100 of mine and gave her 100. So we kind of balanced it out. And so I could smooth things over a little bit. And I'll tell you, that first month, it was so bad. I hated it. And the second month might have been worse, because I knew what I was getting into, and we didn't have any sinking funds built up, right? So if something happens, like a car repair or something like that, like we had to scramble and rework everything to try to make it work. And the third month, I don't know, it might have been worse than the first two. Like it was bad, right? And after the first year, we looked back and it was like, holy cow, the amount of success that we've had in 1 year is unreal. First of all, we were saving money. We were, we had investments going to different accounts. We knew where all of our money was going ahead of the month, so we could kind of see what we were planning for each month. One of my, and I don't know if you guys in California have this or not, but do you guys have a car property tax?
No, not that I think.
I don't think so.
No,
A car?
no, I don't
So
think so.
every December, we have to pay property tax on our vehicles that we own. And well, and that's not just cars, it's like jet skis and campers and whatever you own, you have to pay taxes on it every December. Well, December is also Christmas and, holiday parties and all the things that are going on with everything. And then they throw on this property tax, which at that point in time, we were paying $350 per vehicle for our property tax. So you're getting hit with $700 in December. To say that I was mad about it would be like the most massive understatement. I hated the property tax. First of all, you already own the thing, right? And then they're taxing you on owning it. It still blows my mind. But we now have a sinking fund for that. And we put a little bit of money away every single month. So that way, when December comes, I still don't love it. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It makes me mad. But now I have a pot of money that's set aside specifically for that. And when those bills come, I just push it off. Boom, it's gone. And then I don't worry about it quite as much. And my wife doesn't have to hear me moaning and complaining about it because I would. I'm not going to lie. It was a major thing in my life for a while. But there's things like that for everything, right? And the first year, that was challenging because when that property tax came up in December, since we had only started our budget in August, we didn't have it funded all the way. And so we had to figure out, okay, where's this money going to come from? How can we do this? But the next year, guess what? We had a fully funded property tax. We shot that thing off and it was fine. It was good to go. And we did that for every single thing that came up. And maybe the first time around, maybe it sucked. But the second time that it came up, we knew it was going to come and we prepared for it. And that's where I think that the power of the budget comes in.
That's awesome. That's a great example too.
Hmm?
If you ever need to use a good example, the Missouri car property tax.
That's sinking funds took us a long time to really sort out. And I was still mad when we had to fix our car and transfer over $1,400. It still made me mad. I didn't want to pay for it, but we had the money to do it. So it made me slightly less annoyed.
Oh, I mean, think of
Less stressed for sure.
$1,400 though to the average American. That's like you can't do that.
Yeah.
That's either
Yeah.
going on a credit card that's already out leveraged, or you're scrambling to make ends meet somehow.
Right.
I mean, yeah, like you said, the power of a budget and sinking funds is astronomical after the first year go around of like, okay, what does our life really look like? What do we really spend or need? So that's awesome. Okay, so to piggyback off all of that, between you and your wife, and I can probably guess this answer, is there a saver versus a spender? And how do you guys manage like navigating that head to head in your relationship? Because money obviously can sometimes be a tense issue.
Yeah. So my wife is awesome, first of all, and she puts up with me, which is incredible. And I don't understand exactly how or why she does that. We are an interesting couple because we are both savers.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just the extreme. So it feels to me like she is a little bit of a spender, but the fact is that honestly she's not at all. And one of the things that I appreciate the most about her is that she forces me to spend on things that we need, because I will not, and then I will regret it whenever the time, because she'll prepare ahead, right? So she prepares and she's like, hey, this thing's coming up in a couple of weeks. We need to start figuring out how we're going to find it for either a cheaper cost or the most value for what we're going to spend. And I hate to spend. I just do. It's ingrained in me. I do not like to spend on anything. And so before Calla, I would wait and then probably spend more freaking out last minute trying to figure out how I'm going to buy the thing. And she does a really good job of figuring out, like, we don't coupon necessarily or anything like that, but we do figure out like, hey, we need a car seat right now was one of the things that we needed. How can we find this? Because we know it's coming up. let's start looking for deals and figure out when the next sale is going to be. And then the sale came up, and guess what? We bought it for about, I think it was $100 cheaper. And I know me, I didn't want to buy it. I would have waited until we really needed it and then paid full price for the thing. So we do. She helps keep me in balance because my I want to call them frugal, but sometimes they even get pushed to like cheap my ways. She helps counteract that a little bit.
I am definitely the saver. That was sarcasm.
Okay, I was like, hang on. I love you, but I was like, wait a minute. Like, if you want to say that, like, maybe I'm the extreme, like David, okay, I'll give you that. But, like, oh my gosh, my heart dropped for a minute. Like, I was like,
You thought I was
this
serious?
is you saving?
You thought I was serious?
I don't know. I mean, you do a pretty good job. I will
I
give you
can
credit.
do a good job, but I really like to spend money.
You do, but in fairness, it's always in the budget.
Yeah.
You always keep it in the budget. You
Because
never
I
like
budget
spend
for
outside
my
of the budget.
spending.
You definitely budget for your spending.
See, and I think
Yes.
that's the most important thing, is that you don't have to restrict yourself because you're on a budget. You just
Yep.
have to make sure that it fits within your budget. And then, if you have taken care of the things that are important to you, and then you want to have some fun also, hey, more power to you. We still have a good time. We go on vacations. We go out to dinner. We do, we go out for drinks. We do all the things. We just might not go out to the like most exclusive restaurant or bars
Right.
or anything like that. I've been to a couple places where you have to pay for like $20 drinks. I don't love that. I hate it. So I'd rather get like cheap drinks, right? But we still do things that we enjoy. We just figure out how can we make this work within the money that we're making.
Love that.
Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of the people who are on a FIRE journey, financial independence, retire early. I see two sides of it. Some people really just invest absolutely everything they can so they can retire at 30 years old or whatever and then live a luscious retirement. And other people kind of go midway. Are you on a FIRE journey, or are you just on track to retire when the time comes?
So that's such an interesting question. And my response has changed so many times over the years. But whenever I was teaching, I was 100% on the FIRE journey. And I think it was because I was really dissatisfied at different points in time with what I was doing. I had a year where I was doing financial coaching and stayed home with my daughter. And I'm like, I don't really want to stay home full time. I don't like it. I'm a people person. I like to be out and about. I like to talk to people. I like to do things. And also, not only was I home with my daughter for a year, but it was also a COVID year. So we really didn't go out at all. And so I did not enjoy that. What I'm doing now in the financial advising world, I absolutely love. And I think it's like I get to help people that I want to help, and work with people that I want to work with, more or less. And so it's all shifted now because I still want to have the option to do the things that I want to do. So that's where I think the FI part of it comes in, the financial independence. But I also don't necessarily, at this moment right now, care about retiring early because I found something that I really enjoy. I think that a lot of times the people that are heavy into the FIRE movement are people that are dissatisfied with their jobs and want to, crank out as much as they can at a young age to get out as quickly as possible. Where if they took that same energy and found something that they love to do, they might not want to save every penny and might be okay with working a little bit longer. But it's so tough because if money drives what you have to do, like I said earlier, then you might be stuck in a career that you don't necessarily love.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think if you can find the balance and happen to find a career that you enjoy, then you can have that choice. If you do reach FI, where you can continue working and enjoy it, or you could retire whenever you feel like it, but you have the option.
I think there's a really cool phenomena too, and I don't remember who mentioned it. It might have been Travis on Meaning Over Money, but that when people find those things that they're passionate about, even if it's originally less money than their former position, they end up becoming so successful at it, or working so hard, or finding the ways to make it work for them, that they end up making more money in the long run. Now, obviously, if you have some lush, Fortune 500 job and you're like, I really want to teach. I mean, newsflash, like we said earlier, teachers don't get paid the most money in the world, so that's probably not going to be it. But you can still find a ton of value and enjoy what you do, and you don't have to like just dream that you're going to retire early.
One of the things that I've heard mentioned a lot is this concept of baristify. Have you guys ever heard of that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is though.
So basically, you have enough money to be able to retire, but you want to work at a job for basically health insurance reasons and maybe to make a little bit of money along the way. And so people talk about wanting to work as a barista. And it's funny because actually Ian and I on the Budget Teacher podcast, we discussed this quite a bit because there's also a bunch of people that say that they want to retire from their jobs when they have reached financial independence and be a teacher. And I'm like, I've been into a lot of coffee places over my lifetime, and I've been into a lot of schools over my lifetime. Neither one of them are low stress jobs. Like, do these people not realize that like teaching is not like, oh, I'm going to go, sip my coffee and drink my newspaper. And, there's some kids, especially like you've been teaching middle school and fifth grade. It's like, no, that's not how this works. Like they're going to push me every day and you're going to be super, super stressed out. And admin's going to be down your throat about something, and district office has some new initiative that they're pushing, and some kids doing something weird in your class that you're having to like put that fire out. And I don't know who thinks that these stress-free jobs are the way to go, because I'm like, there's no stress-free job as a barista or a teacher.
No, like there's so many other jobs. I've told Haley that like I would just want to go work as a librarian. Like just like the public library, just around some books. And like, do some cool things like, hey, set up the kids, Wednesday morning reading club where it's like parent and me come in and read book or whatever. Like, yeah, barista. Like, I want to get yelled at 6 a.m. when I don't have to. That sounds great.
Here's the best part is that there's some librarians out there listening to this right now. They're like that, oh my gosh, let me tell him about my experience, because I'm sure that even in their job, there's probably some non-glamorous aspects to it that we don't necessarily see, because we're like, oh, you get to go into this quiet place and pick out a book and check it out and leave. And then, so any job, there's probably, I don't know what they are. We need to find, Haley, you need to run that poll on your Instagram and find out what like the best jobs are that we could retire to.
Yeah,
okay.
We'll stop calling it barista fire. We'll start calling it whatever it is. I don't know.
I bet lay on a raft on a beach and get paid fire.
There's some the librarian, that's like, have you ever tried to reshelve books? Like in crunch time when you've got 20 minutes till you're off work and all the books have to be reshelved.
That would give me anxiety.
Yeah. Oh, that's too funny. Okay, so David, before we get to our final last famous question, which I'm sure you've heard a million times, obviously, as an avid listener, I just want to ask, was there ever any profound moment of like financial clarity when you were teaching that made you think, I've got to rethink how I'm doing this whole money thing? When I was thinking of this question just in our own lives, I thought the first time I kind of found out that we were on either a 10 or 11 paycheck system, not a 12-month paycheck system, or when I got my first paycheck and was like, okay, 16% of my paycheck is going to our retirement system. Was there ever a moment for you that you were like, okay, I've got to rethink of how I'm looking at this?
So yes, as I was working, and I think it's like this in most places, but I can't guarantee it is. So I apologize if I say this incorrectly to any other teachers. But in my district, we had a salary schedule where it was basically the amount of years that you worked and the amount of education that you have, and you find your box on the grid, and that's where you're at for the year. And then the next year after that, if you stayed in the same education, but you're now one more year up on the salary schedule, you just move the next box down. I think it was my fourth or fifth year in, and I was looking at this grid and I was like, man, I'm basically stuck. And I couldn't stand it. And I know there's so many teachers out there that see that and they might not mind it, because I talked to a ton of people in my own district who said, I'm so thankful and love the fact that I have a set salary that I know I'm going to get. And it's a very, very stable career. And once in Missouri, well, in my district, I guess not, I don't know about all of Missouri. In my district, you were tenured after 5 years. And so the stability there, unless you really mess something up, you're not going to get fired or your job's not going anywhere. And so some people really like that. I looked at it again like I was trapped. And I was like, okay, I know where I'm going to be at next year. I can look and tell you where I'm going to be at in 5 years from now. And I can tell you where I'm going to be at my last year of teaching. And I could not stand that. And I am the type of person where I would rather make $0 with the possibility of making a lot if I worked really hard at it, rather than making, $65,000, no matter whether I worked super hard or didn't work at all. And not saying that, the teachers are doing that, because I know teachers are working their butts off, but that's just how I felt.
I can definitely relate to that. Looking at the salary schedule and knowing that I could work 70 hours a week and still only make that much money, and then the person next to me, like a teacher, could just come in late every day or do whatever they want, never do what the principal wants, and they can't get fired, they can't get laid off because they're stuck in the district and they don't really have to do anything and they can still get paid the same amount. That was frustrating.
Yeah.
And so that definitely has something to do with why I am considering leaving teaching. I'm not officially saying I'm never going back to teaching, but at this moment in time, I don't know when I will, because of, raising kids and starting my financial coaching business. I'm just leaving it open-ended to kind of see what happens.
That's a great strategy.
All right, our famous last question of the podcast. If you were to put a stop sign in front of someone's financial journey to stop them from doing something, like an epic mistake, what would that be?
So the thing that I would have them stop doing is stop not taking action. So do whatever it is, because so many times I see people where they think about their budget, or they think about an investment, or they think about all of these things, and they think themselves into doing nothing. And the inaction that they're taking is costing them tons and tons of time. It's costing them tons and tons of money. And I am guilty of it. So I'm not preaching it from a soapbox, but I'm saying I've lived it. I've been there. And I thought about the budget before I did it for probably, 8 months before we actually went and started it. And the only way that you can figure out what you need to fix is by doing the first thing, because you can't go to iteration 2 or iteration 3 or iteration 20, wherever it may be, unless you just start. And that's the same thing with starting a business. It's the same thing with, if you're thinking about going into a certain field, as far as like teaching and, going into the teaching program, like no matter what you want to do it. And then you can kind of see, is it working? How can I tweak this? How can I make this work better for me as I continue down the path?
That's excellent. I mean, someone recently told me when it came to starting my business, no one is ever ready. I mean, no one is ever ready. You have to just do it. And if you've been thinking of budgeting but you've never been doing it, you should just do it. And you might stumble and fail along the way, but at least you got started.
We've talked a lot about teachers on here, and so I'll speak directly to the teachers here for a moment, because I think that every first day of school, you think about that for the first couple weeks before that moment, and it's like, oh man, this is going to be, there's just some nerves, there's some jitters to that first day, and I don't know how many work days you guys get, but in Missouri we got between like 5 and 7 work days prior to the start of the school year, and I don't know a single teacher that would tell you like, oh, yep, I'm totally ready for day one. There's always like a little bit of nerves, right? But the crazy part about teaching is that whether you're ready or not, there's a day that's going to come, and it's a hard set day, and you're going to have all those kids streaming into your classroom, and you got to figure it out one way or another, because if you're not prepared, get prepared real quick. And if you are prepared, great, you've done some of the prep work ahead of time. And I think that as far as like budgeting or investments or whatever the journey or the challenge that you're looking at right now, set a hard date on it and be like, I'm doing whatever that thing is on this date, because that way, like a teacher each year, you're not going to be ready most of the time, but you still need to go do it, because that's how you're going to learn and figure out what you have to do in the future for day 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yep. Gotta get started.
Yeah, there's that famous saying, like, I say famous, I don't know, the paralysis by analysis, where people just overthink it and overthink it and overthink it, and then they never end up doing anything because they're just like paralyzed by the thought of all of it.
And it's a famous saying now that you've said it.
Hey, look at that.
I mean, everything you say is famous.
Perfect. Thanks, honey. That's awesome. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us today. Like I said, this has been a dream come true for me, and I can't wait until this audio comes out so I could just play this over and over on my drive to work each morning. But if you don't mind, let our listeners know where they can find you.
Sure. So there's a website that's going up that I will be on very shortly. It's called teacherswithaplan.com. And then if anybody wants to email me, I'd love to chat about anything. And my email is dg@reliancefin.com. And I'll spell it out because it can be a little confusing. It's dg@reliantfin.com.
And I will make sure to put both of those in the show notes so people can contact you. And since you are no longer Mr. Budget Teacher, if they can go find your old podcast, it's a great thing to binge.
Yes.
Justin is a super mega fan.
Yeah, the biggest. The biggest. I had to process and grieve when it was no longer on.
Yeah, he was
Well,
really
Ian
sad.
still says that he's going to revive it. He still says it.
I'm waiting for him. I want him to. Miss you, Ian. If you listen to this, can't wait. Well, thank you, David. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. It's always great getting to chat with you, my friend. Thanks for listening to The Price of Avocado Toast. If you vibed with this episode, share it with a friend that you're comfortable having money talks with. And if you don't mind, we'd love if you could rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you're in need of my support as a financial coach, message me on Instagram. I'd love to help in any way that I can. Until next time.